What do you think our largest standing military was?
World
Google
War
that
II.
maybe.
The lead up to World
Like
War
what
II.
the size was though compared to now, because you have to think as the population's gotten bigger, that would have probably had to have shrunk a little bit. Like the
Yeah.
amount of active duty people, and just the fact that over time in technology, like we probably only need so many military people because we've gone more to like intelligence battles instead of like on the ground foot soldiers.
Let's see. More than 16 million did so in World War II.
Jesus
But
Christ.
they had the draft also, and they needed people.
Yeah, but 8 times as many people?
Yeah. But
That's
I mean,
nuts.
that's what I'm saying is that, like, so it is a rarity you see people, and I mean that in a good way. Like, those are people that kind of. But what I'm saying is, I'm almost on their side in the scenario of saying, yes, you've served in the military, but do you feel like a couple more years as a civilian might have either served you better, or would you have had a different outlook on going into it? There's a reason that people get recruited right out of high school.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what the requirements are. I actually work with a guy that used to be a recruiter, but it is kind of an interesting thought. Like, if you were to continue your education for longer, would you be less inclined to join? Even like as far as not experiences, but like just learning, would you be less inclined? And the reason that I brought this up is we're talking about as you're getting further away from being 18, like as you're getting older. Could you imagine wanting something so much more for your life that you would be willing to forge your birth certificate at 15 years old to go into the army?
It if it's the escape and you're in a position. Here's the thing, like, I've never been in a position where that was my thought, where I was like, I can always seek refuge here. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know this option is here if I need it, and I could go ahead and attempt to like sign up. But you would have to have really bad circumstances, I think, for that to be the primary factor in doing it. You'd have to be in the poorest county in the United States. They got affected by like the Great Depression. Was it the Dust Bowl or something like
Great
that?
Depression.
It was the Great Depression.
I allegedly maybe.
Yeah, you would have to be fucking making moonshine as a fucking kid trying to sell it to make money.
And you may have fucked a chicken. That sounds pretty specific, doesn't
I,
it?
I was gonna say you never know what goes on there.
You know why it would have to be that specific?
Why is that?
Because our topic today is Lawrence goddamn Flint.
Larry, when you got Larry GD Flint.
Larry G.D. Flint. Yeah, hit the music.
Oh, we don't have to wait for the. It'll just kick in right
Yeah.
there. So, and we're back.
Do you...
Are you like holding a toast as you start to first talk about?
Oh,
Larry
yeah, I
Flynt?
didn't even think about that. That was just a thank you to a great man. As a kid, what do you think your nudie mag of choice was? Were you
Whatever
more
I
of
could
a...
get my hand, whatever was available, man. I didn't have the luxury of the luxury of having a preference.
I was 14, you think it fucking mattered?
No, my way. Let's see, man. It was right at the birth of the internet, so I really didn't have to get a magazine. I was pretty computer.
When did you
savvy.
start looking at porn?
Like actively seeking it out, or just looking
Yeah.
at it if it found its way to me?
Maybe both. I don't know. Like the first time I saw...
I think I've told you about this. I think the first nudie mag I saw was we went out to like my dad's friend owned a metal fabrication shop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he had an old truck, broken down truck, like out there. And if my dad was in talking to him, I'd go out and play in it and stuff. And I popped up in the glove compartment, and it was black and white.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it seemed like classy. I was like, oh, at least it's in black and white. This must be from the olden days. Seeking it out, I don't know, 15, 16.
Yeah, so I guess
As soon
that
as
was...
Dish TV.
That was probably pretty close to like the internet days of porn and all that
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
it was
stuff.
dial-up, but that was when like satellite TV came out, and if you stayed up long enough and you had Cinemax, you were
get the
catching Red Shoe Diaries, Real Sex, which I'm not like I'm just kind of realizing it now. Like as a kid watching Real Sex, if anyone doesn't know Real Sex, I don't know if it's still on or not, but Real Sex used to be this show,
You can find
and
it.
it wasn't just basically think of it like almost as a documentary type sex show. So they would like explore like swingers. So this wasn't like porn stars. This was like real people.
It
So
was
as
like
a
true life for sex.
yeah, exactly. So like as a, I'm just thinking about this as like a 16-year-old kid and being like, oh, these people are just swinging, okay, but then having no desire to do it now. Like, do you think that being more aware of that stuff and being like, these are all options, and just being able to get those preferences out of the way at a young age, being like, this isn't doing it for me. Yeah, this is. Oh, that. Okay, didn't think that was going to do it for me. It is.
It's like immersion therapy or immersion therapy for porn. That's, I don't know. I think
What was your choice? What was your?
I remember my first one. Me and my best friend in fifth grade, he had a penthouse, and I remember that penthouse. I could probably tell you like what pages were what, and like if I had to think about it, I could. That was the one that was found in the gun holster.
Okay, I always thought growing up I knew about Playboy, and I knew that Playboy was supposed to be like kind of the classier one and everything, which I wasn't thrilled about. But I always knew that Penthouse was like Hustler was like this far away thing, like the unattainable thing. Like if you find a Hustler, it's gonna be
Hustler was Mordor.
yes, yeah, trying to get the ring to there. But Penthouse was the one that you were like, okay, Penthouse is attainable. Like I can try to snag one of those, and I know that it showed more.
Penthouse, I don't know if it was just everyone that I got or that we got our hands on, but they would always, it seemed like every month they would have a different picture of a woman pissing outside. And that was the first time that I had ever, obviously, like, had ever laid eyes on that happening. And it was the first time I wondered, like, how do they just sit and piss? Because obviously they're standing in nature and shit like that. And thank God pee stuff didn't, like, really turn my engine on. But it was like that page.
At that time.
I still know. But it didn't really, like, click over like that's a sexual thing for me. And thank God that it didn't. Because I don't know if I'd be into, like, pee play and shit play. That, I'd probably have to put myself in an institution.
I like looking into Larry. There's certain things that you'll come across and be like, oh shit, like I had no idea. So like this is going ahead a little bit and then we'll back up. But Hustler was the first one to show the pink shots. And so the pink shots are the open vulva shots where they're basically just like spreading it a little bit. If you didn't notice, this is marked an explicit podcast.
I think they all are.
Yeah, they are. Okay.
This one I'm excited for because we can talk about sexual stuff and it's not like we're just all in the sex
We're on
world
the
at this
topic.
point. Yeah.
All right. So Larry Flynt was actually born back in 1942. So his father actually, so his mother was pregnant with him, and then his father shipped off for World War II and went and served over there, I think in like Europe. Mother Edith. Let's just get to the. I'm going to go through his stats, then we're going to get to the good stuff.
Okay.
So, Mother Edith, homemaker. Father Larry, sharecropper. I don't know what that is. Probably a term that was used by a lot of people for a farmer.
Well, and not to jump in on that, but they were in Lakeville, Kentucky. And like you mentioned earlier, Lakeville, Kentucky was the poorest county during the Great Depression.
McGoffin?
It was McGoffin County.
McGoffin
Is that
County.
what?
It's in Tennessee, yeah. No,
I thought it was in
Tennessee.
Kentucky. I'm pretty sure it was in Kentucky.
Okay, I might have been thinking Tennessee. Let's go with Kentucky.
So that's just like the baseline, and I think a sharecropper is somebody who is like leased an amount of acreage that then you make that, and then once you sell it off to the actual person that owns the land, you get to keep the rest of it. So a very poor job.
Yeah.
But you're growing up in the most fucking destitute, desolate place.
There's no one you look around
No.
and there's no hope, and so that's what you were talking about. You forge your birth certificate, and at 15 you go join the army.
And that was after his parents got a divorce. So as a kid, yeah, I guess we'll just go through that. And he's got a few fucking weird kid things that make me understand Larry a little bit more. But he had
goes
two
between,
sisters.
like his mother and his father. It seems like at different courses of his life.
Yeah, and mother and father going back and forth depending on him. When he was 9 years old, his sister died of leukemia at 4.
Mm-hmm.
And that basically split his parents up. Like, so you not only lose your sister, but then the grief of losing your sister also makes your parents split up. So his dad was an alcoholic, and I'm sure it probably wasn't a great home life. But I do have to think that there is a part of you that's like, hey, two parents together may be better than like trying to figure out. Because if you don't have that bond, you're going to lose one of your parents probably pretty quick.
Well, yeah, but at that point, like, there's no, that's not, no one's ever thinking about the kids.
No,
like, I don't
that's
think that's a
true.
priority at that point because you don't know enough to know that that's going to kind of fuck up the kids and everything. Did his sister really die that early in his life?
Yeah.
I thought I read that it was later in his life.
No, I'm pretty sure he was 9 and she was 4.
Find out. Keep talking about Larry.
Also, just kind of during the formative years of Larry Flynt, and keep in mind this is all a lot of stuff from like his autobiography and different things that he's said. So you kind of have to take a guy who has a passion for the grand at like an all-time high. Like he's always going to play up every story. He said that at 7 years old he was fondled by a teenage girl in front of his cousin. So I'm not sure if that's like, if it's real, that's probably pretty bad.
I don't feel like he has to do this though because it's crazy to fucking see some of the like just his like the early part of his life, not like being a kid or anything like that. So he goes into the army, he's honorably discharged, goes to work for like an affiliate of General Motors. Then after he gets like laid off after 3 months due to like downsizing, he becomes a bootlegger.
Well, it's the same thing that happened. He got downsized out of the military when he snuck in there, and then he got downsized out of GM. So he keeps trying to get these jobs, and he keeps losing these jobs.
Well, the same thing though. It's not a dishonorable discharge.
No, it's not.
So he stops bootlegging because deputies in the county are actually he hears that they're after him or that they're onto him. I don't think it like onto him means like they know who it is. I just think they're aware of he's bootlegging and so they're searching for the person doing it.
Well, and during that time, like his dad, that's just what his dad did.
Yes.
He bootlegged out of a dry county. So after the divorce happened, he moved up to live with his mom. I think they were in Ohio at this point in time. And ended up getting tired of her just getting shipped around, and he was running away a lot. So then they forged the birth certificate. He joins the military.
Didn't like the mom's new boyfriend or some shit.
Could be.
Something like that.
And like you say, after he got done with GM and all that, he moved back down to Kentucky with his dad, where they were bootlegging together because he wanted to kind of learn the family business, I think. And then once I think they caught on to his dad and just their whole program is when he tried to get out of there. But I would be remiss just because it is not a vital part of the story, but the fact that it kind of keeps popping up. I mentioned it earlier. At age 9, prior to his sister dying, he admits that he caught one of his grandmother's chickens and fucked it and then murdered it. And in his autobiography, he said that he put his dick in the egg sack.
He didn't want the chicken being able to talk about it. Didn't want to leave witnesses. I don't know, man. Like that's I don't like that you choose to focus on that part of the story.
I do because I think it's so Larry. Because
that's so 9-year-old Larry chicken fucker.
We'll get to it later on when we talk about kind of like his accomplishments and his achievements. But his house that they had in Ohio after he first really made it big, it was so fucking big that they had a replica of the log cabin that he lived in Kentucky in the basement. And there was a 3-foot tall golden chicken down there that was the replica of the chicken that he said that he fucked at 9 years old. And to me, like I say, when I say that's so Larry, like this dude only did shit that he liked. And he was always trying to stretch the truth and get like crazy with it. Not, I think, really as much to draw attention as it was just because he enjoyed seeing people be like, what the fuck did that guy just say? Or what did he just put in his magazine? Like he was.
That's how he got his kicks, was just trying to push the envelope and push the envelopes and see how much he could offend people while still staying within the confines of the established law.
Obscenities and different
Yes.
things like that. That's why I love this guy though. And
I have such mixed feelings on him. Like if I just read his list of like the good shit, I'd be like, oh yeah, like you can overlook all this. This is just eccentric. Like it's porn. If you don't like it, don't look at it. But then like some of the other stuff that came out about like the allegations between like him and like his daughter and that kind of stuff, like you can't read that. Okay, it's a classic situation of separating the man from what the man did. The actions or a select group of his actions, so all the positive stuff, so it doesn't give him a wash as a person to wipe away the negatives and everything. So the way I'm just going to discuss it, like, because I know we're going to go between like some of the good and the bad, is it's just a guy, but the guy, what he did, the actions that he took as far as pushing the envelope of like obscenity, free speech and stuff, that's like that's what's going to last. It's not going to have his name on it perhaps, but what he did is going to be the most long-standing, or
you think?
Yeah.
I look at it almost more as, and I'm not a like, oh, this woman said this for this reason or that reason. I generally, I mean, I'll listen to the story if it sounds legitimate. I'll care about it more. But one of the things that I saw was like there is the allegations with his daughter and that kind of thing, but it always seems like they're just more allegations instead of provable things.
Yeah.
And sort of his outlook in life that we'll get into was Larry loved women. And for as many times and as long as Larry worked around like these models and porn stars and stuff like that, there was a lot less of the negative things. Like I would figure that Larry Flynt would be done like Hugh did after he died. Like it was always, yeah, Hugh turns out he was a little bit creepy. He was sort of a little forceful with the women. Flint died in 2021, and I don't know if maybe it was just because most of his shocking shit was already out there, but you didn't hear a lot of post-mortem like, this is what happened.
That's true. I just don't know if you can be that far in this life like he was and not have some of that to your personality.
That's fair.
So
yeah.
it's hard to, and so I'm going to try to keep those separated on it, but
The great actress, I listened to the great actress Lisa Ann. If you're not familiar with her work, go ahead and Google her, watch one of her movies. She's in such films as Who's Nailing Palin, all that kind of stuff. But I listened to an interview, and he was really, really good friends with with Larry himself, and then with the wife that he had
good friends.
last, huh?
She was good friends.
Yeah, Lisa Ann was good friends with them.
Good friends.
And she said that out of all the people that she'd worked with, because Lisa Ann like got her start dancing in clubs, and that was mainly what she did, and then she got into her theatrical works. And she said that she would agree that Larry was a pervert, but he always had a healthy respect for any of the talent that he had. And one of his really great things was the majority of the management at Hustler has primarily always been women. And he's always put women in more of leadership roles, partially because he loved them, but partially because he believed that they were very good in the industry because they were the acts that people came to see. So they would know exactly what they wanted. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, he seems, that's the other thing that's kind of surprising, is he seems like very smart, like regardless of his upbringing. But so he gets done bootlegging, finding out that what?
He seems very smart. He might have fucked a chicken, but he seems very smart for that upbringing.
Despite the chicken fucking thing, he seems pretty with it. So he ends up, after leaving the bootlegging thing, joins the Navy and is a radar operator on the USS Enterprise, the aircraft carrier. And he's the one on station when it picks up John Glenn's space capsule.
Ooh, we missed a very important part of his life in the Army. So after he joined the Army, during basic training, they were away on a mission. And at age 15, they were staying in a hotel that was a whorehouse. And Larry ended up losing his virginity to a 40-plus-year-old woman.
No.
Yeah.
No. He lost virginity, according to you, to the chicken.
Oh. If it's a non-human, is that... Virginity?
I would have thought you would have thought more about this.
Yeah, okay, so maybe he didn't lose
So
his
the first
virginity.
woman he has intercourse with is a 40-year-old prostitute. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you imagine being a 15-year-old and getting like an old veteran like that and trying to figure out what you've done? Like, allegedly, he says about the story that she walked in and asked him if it was his first time, and he said no, and she goes, "Yeah, right, I bet." So like
Yeah,
she knowingly,
he's like, nope. He's like, I've killed chickens all over this county.
lady, I've done shit that would make you blush, and you're a giant whore. But he loses his virginity that young, and I guess not virginity, but he has sex with a woman for the first time when he's that young, which to me is a life experience. I think that probably would have led him faster back into the military after he got that. And this was during his army run, so he ends up, after he drops out of there, joins the Navy like you're talking about. Excuse me, at 19 he marries a lady named Peggy. And Peggy was a whore. He actually, I think, no.
Like, are you saying that Peggy was actually a whore, or are you just saying Peggy had whore-like tendencies?
We'll get to it. The reason I'm having trouble with this is Larry had 5 wives over his entire life.
Yeah.
And he really starts banging them out early.
I think the average range is like 3 to 5 years.
Some,
I looked at it, it was like 71 to 75, 76 to 60, or like 70, but like, or 80 or something, or 70.
So, to get me back on track, he gets married before his first deployment, quick divorce. He says that they got divorced because she was bad at sex.
His first Navy deployment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So his first Navy deployment, he ends up divorcing her quickly after they get married, and his reasoning was the sex was bad, which seems like something you should probably pound out before you get married.
No, that's like, if you really thought about it, that is the quintessential answer that like a fucking 18-year-old would give as a reason for divorce.
Fair.
I mean, like,
yeah.
Why did you guys get? It's not like irreconcilable differences or like we couldn't agree on how to load the dishwasher. It's like, come on, man, I thought the sex was gonna be better. It sucks.
She loaded the toilet paper wrong and she fucked bad, so I was out.
Motion granted.
Everybody else is like irreconcilable differences. He's like, she bought the wrong kind of Doritos at the store. He's like, okay, you're fucking 16.
So here's the other thing too. So he gets honorably discharged out of the Navy in 64. He's already served in the Army, done a bunch of other jobs, bootlegged, and served in the Navy by the time he's 22.
He did 2 world tours while he was in the Navy. And that was before, like he said, what, 22?
Yeah, well, he was when he got honorably discharged from the Navy. He was 22. Like, Jesus, that's kind of a theme for him. Is like he like does not waste time.
No, because at 19 he gets married a second time, which to be married twice at 19 is crazy. He married Peggy at 19, and when I say that Peggy is a slut, I don't mean that in a good way.
Like, Peggy, you're such a slut.
Yeah, I don't mean that in a good way. So Larry takes off after. Actually, previously to marrying Peggy, he takes off for another deployment. He's gone for 14 months. He ends up coming back from that deployment, and Peggy is 7 months pregnant. So I'm not great at math. If he's gone for 14, she gets pregnant, and she's 7 months along.
We get it. We get it.
Yeah, she's figured that out. Larry decided that wasn't enough of a reason to not marry her, and ends
an
up
immaculate conception.
I'm sure he knew. I mean, Larry at this point was a dirty boy. Terrible marriage.
Well, he was probably fucking at different areas.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, I mean, at least he's not hypocritical.
No. It only changes because Peggy didn't stop seeing sailors and Navy men after they were married. And there were multiple times that he said that he was running sailors out of his bedroom, which unfortunately leads into more of what you were talking about.
I mean, he was a sailor.
Yeah, there was some fairly open abuse that was committed in that marriage, and obviously abuse is never okay.
I think what you're getting at is he does not have a traditional view of marriage.
No, he got arrested one time for discharging a firearm at his mother-in-law, I want to say.
One of the 5
Yeah,
mother-in-laws.
Peggy's mother.
Okay.
So they get a kid out of that marriage, but another divorce. It's Larry's first real, like, his kid, but it ends in another divorce. And I want to say
it's not his kid though.
they had a child together after the
Okay.
one that wasn't his.
Okay. Well, he stuck around for that long for
yeah.
her to have the kid, then be able to have an okay.
And I'm sure it was like he was probably still fucking on the side at that
Yeah.
point too, especially after he was finding that Peggy was doing it. So it wasn't a monogamous relationship. Is that the correct term?
It's open.
Open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have it written up there.
No, that's Althea.
Oh,
And
okay.
Althea was an angel. Althea got done dirtier in film. We've talked about a lot of movies that people get gussied up. Larry got gussied up by Woody Harrelson, and Althea got fucked because she got that stupid...
Courtney Love.
Yeah. Thanks for cutting me off before those words got worse.
So the other thing too is like having served in the Army and the Navy, he seems like he's actually pretty decent with money because he has like a lot of savings now. And so what he ends up doing is kind of his first business is he buys his mother's bar in Dayton. It was called like Freebies or something. It was like
It was a cow... No. It was Hillbilly Heaven, wasn't it?
no, it was like I don't know why I don't have this.
I could... when he bought it or what he renamed it? I'm pretty sure he named it like the Hillbilly Hideaway or some shit like that.
Kiwi. It was called the Kiwi. Keewee. So he buys that, turns the bar around, starts making a profit. So after that, he buys 2 more bars, and then he opens up finally the Hustler Club, which was basically after having those 3 bars. He's like, I want to make an upscale bar now, and I'm going to have topless waitresses and topless dancers or naked dancers. So he does that in...
But it was the first one that also served food.
Yes.
So the way that it crafted in my mind was kind of like a strip club meets like a Hooters.
Yeah, but it also kind of sounds like it's not like... It's almost buffet style, the way they kind of talked about it.
So
Which
maybe
might be
more of
even
the strip club buffet model.
Yes.
Maybe he was the one that first came up with the strip
There you
club
go,
buffet.
We're going to get a lap dance and fucking prime rib. So he opens that in 68. At that point, that's when he was dipping his toes, or maybe just kind of upping it. But he was working 20-hour days, and that's when he was doing the amphetamines. So
He was certainly no stranger to drugs for most of his
no,
life.
it definitely sounds like he was pretty open in his life. But so over that time of opening the first Hustler Club, he ends up opening 5 more Hustler Clubs in Ohio. And it's like the major areas like Toledo, Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, or I think this one, the original might have been in Cincinnati.
Yeah, he wasn't... They were out... Maybe they were in the outskirts of Cincinnati, because he didn't grow up in a big town in Ohio. But he does also, over the course of his life, have to go to Cincinnati multiple times because he has to go fight obscenity charges in Cincinnati.
Well, and then kind of as part of the Hustler Club, so, advertising for, at this point, for like strip clubs and everything is pretty difficult because you have to get someone, unless, what's going to draw someone in is going to be seeing the dancers. You can put out an ad in the paper, but maybe some papers don't want to be associated with the strip club and putting your ads in it. Or how do you make an ad that's going to go ahead and draw people in? So he gets the idea of making the Hustler newsletter. And basically it's a 2-page black and white of just Polaroids and pictures of the girls that were there and that would be dancing. So naked pictures. And I don't know how he distributed them. I think they were like, one guy told him, he's like, no, he's like, how do I subscribe to it? And he's like, well, it's not a subscription, it's like an ad. And he's like, how did you find it? He's like, I found it in a men's bathroom.
So, a little prior to that, in 73, when he has 8 of these Hustler Clubs...
Well, the newsletter was 72. That's when
Yeah.
he did just the 2-page black and white.
Well, this was kind of something that he was, like you were talking about, they'd be distributed in men's rooms. Althea, at this point, we'll get into how they meet, but she kind of starts to shape stuff. So he's interviewing dancers and gets 17-year-old Althea that walks in with a fake birth certificate, hands it to him. He immediately knows this game. He's like, how old are you? She's like, 18. He goes, bullshit. You're like 15, 16. She goes, no, actually, I'm 17 and I'm really close. Althea, for as bad as Larry's childhood was, like maybe getting molested at 7, seeing his sister die and all that shit, Althea takes the cake for bad childhoods.
Well, he's like, at this point, opening the Hustler Club, he's 26. He's 20. He's 26. He already owns 3 bars, and he's opening like this strip club.
She was very attractive, and I'm not saying that like, oh, maybe I need to back that up because she was 17 at the time.
I'm not. That's what I'm not saying either. I'm not saying like he was only 26. What I'm saying is that at this point, he's 26. He still has like his
wealth of adult knowledge.
I
and
don't think
assets.
due to his upbringing and stuff like that, and I don't know, man. He's like an old 26, so it even makes it to me like he's had like a world.
He served in the Army and the Navy already, and
He's
been honorably discharged.
Yeah, he's been on his own since he was like 11, or for 11 years. So the fact that this is just kind of weird to me is that he seems like he should be more savvy than to hook up with a 17-year-old. He should know the repercussions of that.
I don't think, and this is going to sound bad, and I don't agree with it, and I fucking hate the fact that this is the way that it was. I think before 1980, like 15 to 17 or 15 to 18, that was fair play. And I'm not saying that that's right, because it's very gross in this day and age, but I think there was a time in this country and fucking everywhere else that it was like you hear 26 and 17, and it's like, not ew, that's gross. It's like, oh, this girl is getting a better start in life.
It's more of a eh.
Yeah. Like, that I think is kind of more of a deal.
That's before they knew how, like, literally still stupid kids are between 15 and 18. When your brain is still mush and you can be easily talked into and impressed by shit.
I think it's partly that, but I also think that it's partly the evolution of the 1800s of being like, well, 15's too young. 17 might be okay. And it's like we've progressed further along.
It was a gray area, and if anybody resided permanently in the gray area, it's Larry Flynt.
He did. But at the same time, he also saw something in Althea, I think, beyond her being 17, because she had already lived a life. I want to say she was 8 years old. Her dad murdered her mother, her grandmother, and then killed himself.
Oh, yeah, she was an orphan, wasn't she? Like,
she was
in an orphanage for a while.
She was an orphan where she was molested by nuns, and then went to an alcoholic aunt. Also not a great situation. So she had already lived kind of a life that I think maybe Larry had kind of seen a little bit in his life.
Like a kindred spirit.
Sort of.
Yeah.
And the way that their whole relationship played out, I feel like there's very few perfect matches in the world. These two were the perfect match, to the point to where when Larry ends up proposing to her, he tells her that upon that proposal, that's just to be together, but he's still going to have sex on the side. Althea says, perfect, I'm bisexual, I would rather fuck women too. So, like, they were even boiled down to the point to where when he brought that up in their relationship, she's like, perfect, this works for me too.
I have something to tell you.
Yeah, like, I like banging women
She's
too.
like, oh. All right, this is going to avoid an awkward conversation later.
Yeah, and so at 17, he brings her aboard and realizes that she has such a penchant for what they're doing that she becomes like the mother figure for all of the bars. So she's for all the clubs.
He's the mother hen.
Yeah, she's looking and residing over all these dancers, taking care of their issues, doing the hiring and firing on their end. And this is where they bump up from just like being a men's room kind of flyer to they start creating like a members only type setup where, they're mailing these newsletters out all across, like it starts to be a bigger thing across the country.
Yeah.
And she actually introduced him to using multiple colors inside the flyer instead of just a black and white, which made me think when you were talking about the porno that you found that was black and white. Are you just referring to
just regular colored photographs? You said use multiple colors.
Well,
you just colored photographs.
There was a time, when it was just black and white.
I know, but once it was colored, it was able to just be colored. It wasn't like we just had, it can only be red. So let's just color some shit red.
You don't think there was a natural progression into that? Like, you think we just went from black and white to just every color?
I think once they discovered color, then they were able to just do all of the colors, because it doesn't make sense to just do you're only going to make the blue stuff blue and then have everything else be black. No,
primary colors.
You can paint like that, but that's not how printing works.
You don't think that they just started printing with primary colors and then they figured out the blends and contours?
Colors, but you could do a lot of stuff with primary colors, because you can also mix every primary color and make the colors you need. That's why they're called primary colors, Adam.
I just don't know if, I figured they probably figured that out 10 years later.
Regardless, listen, they had to have had all the colors because they were able to do pink shots in November '74.
True.
And that pink is not a primary color. It is a mixture of other colors. Game, set, match.
All right, you win.
So '74 is when they actually switch over to the first, like, full-on Hustler magazine. And for those of you that do not know or are too young to remember when it was in a magazine form and the internet didn't exist, Playboy was basically a collection of usually naked, but also like not like exposing the genitals.
Vaseline on the camera, so a little bit of steam in the room.
But you would also see like full boobs.
Everything basically like waist down was more airbrushed.
Yep.
Like you could still see legs, you could see
The
a little
legs
bit
were
of
either
ass.
crossed or closed, or it was a back shot or something. Then you had Penthouse, which was a little more risque. You would see more risque positions of like standing and stuff, but it wouldn't be like, it would be like straight on, so you wouldn't be able to see like between the legs.
Bent over in underwear,
yes,
underpants,
stuff like that. So Hustler was basically like, okay, well, we're just going to go ahead and keep ratcheting it up. So that's where you're starting to get like, it was first published in July '74. They were already doing the exposed vulvas at him in November. So they were just like from July, and then the 4 or 5 months, they're like, fuck it, more.
After Ed Gein, we know that I don't know what a vulva is. So just a full beef shot.
Yeah, it was the spreading of the
lips.
The lips.
Okay, I like that. I like that. oh, that was a bad start to a sentence. All right, so fairly true. I do enjoy that. But
I'm just laughing because, like, in my head, I might have said the same thing in my head, and then you said it out loud. I was like, I hope that wasn't me.
I enjoy it because I know that Larry was for lack of a better term, he was a sexual pioneer and he was a racial pioneer. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that Larry did it necessarily as much to try to stand up. I'm sure that was part of it, like him trying to stand above the others. But Larry was just a dirty man. When I called Larry a pervert earlier, I meant that in the most loving way possible. Larry was a pervert to the nth degree of just being like somebody. It's like, that's what you enjoy, so that's what you put out. Like, if I had a magazine like that, I would probably only cater to the shit that I liked.
Yeah, and here's the thing, too, is that whether it was... And I do feel that he did have... Because he... You know, people can describe themselves all they want. But his actions say that he was very liberal. He liked to push the envelope. I think one of the biggest things he did is he found out what other magazines wouldn't do, and what he knew there would be a niche for a market, because I think he was that guy. He knew the kind of what that pervert wanted. And so he was willing to do what other magazines weren't willing to do, and because of that, that's where he starts getting targeted.
Yeah, he put some wild shit in there. And one of the other things that he did was Althea was the final sign-off on any of the pictures, mm-hmm. which I think is brilliant, because not only can she get a female perspective in it, but she was bisexual. Mm-hmm. So she also would see
who it speak to. You're getting multiple perspectives mm-hmm. of sexual preference.
You would see what a woman likes, mm-hmm. you'd see what a man likes, and then you'd also see what a woman who also likes women likes.
Well, Hustler was also the first one to show penetration, right?
First one to show penetration. Mm-hmm. They were the first one to have a biracial spread in there. Mm-hmm. They were the first one to do male, female threesomes. Yep. They were also the first ones to show a pre-op trans... how do I put this? I don't know the difference, and I'm going to just plead ignorance on this one. Would that be a transvestite or a transsexual?
So you said it was pre-op?
Pre-op, yeah.
So a man transitioning to a woman?
But I think it had both parts. So like a hermaphrodite?
If that's a natural occurrence, I think it's still a hermaphrodite is the...
If we have any trans people out there, I'm sorry. I'm pleading ignorance.
I think they're completely different, man.
I love you either way.
No, trans people would be someone transitioning into the gender that they feel they weren't assigned to. A hermaphrodite, it has nothing to do with their preference. A hermaphrodite is a medical thing where it's both genitalia.
Okay. I think that's what it was. But it was all this different...
It's what no one else would do.
Yeah, and it was mostly based on shit that he liked. And it was the porn that he wanted to see.
Well, and also, he was the one that, like, also started doing the stuff that you shouldn't see. So one of the big ways that Hustler really took off kind of in its early days was Larry Flynt was approached by a photographer. I don't know if the guy was Italian. I think he might have been. So
He might have just been over there staking her out.
yeah. So, but he said he'd waited for 4 months. So this guy had been staking out like this place for 4 months, a resort in Italy, and finally caught the infamous Jackie Kennedy Onassis nude photographs. So like 4 years, he'd been holding them for like 4 years.
4 months, I thought.
Huh?
Was it 4 years or 4 months?
It was 71 when he caught him, and then I think 75 when they got.
okay.
So, and I'm sure he tried to market around, but who the fuck is gonna? No one would touch it.
No.
So finally, I think Larry starts to get a little bit more, he starts to get a little bit more visible. People know this guy contacts him and says, "Hey, I've got these pictures." Larry buys them for $18,000, which is converted to $98,000 today. That's still nothing for what pictures like that could get.
No. And they were a fledgling company at that point. Like he had enough money to keep the lights on, but they certainly weren't making money.
Well, think of it that way. If that guy only sold those for 18,000, I think that's more to say who wouldn't touch those and how limited his options were to sell them. The fact that he accepted 18,000.
It absolutely could be. That to me makes sense. But Larry jumped on that shit fast too. So I also wonder like how long he was in talks with Penthouse and Playboy before Larry finally got in there.
It was so big that I think was it the governor of was it Wisconsin?
Ohio.
Governor of Ohio was photographed buying the issue of Hustler with Jackie O'Kennedy's or Jackie Onassis's nude photos. He was photographed at a newsstand buying it. Didn't send one of his fucking aides or anything like that. He bought it, and then when they asked him about it, he said that he was like, I'm always a student of history, and I've always like loved John F. Kennedy. So why wouldn't I want to buy this?
His reasoning, and this is in Larry's autobiography too, but this was the August 75 issue, and he's printing money at this point. Like this jump started everything. But when you're talking about the Ohio governor,
nationally recognized, if not almost worldwide.
Mm-hmm. So Larry says in his autobiography about the Ohio governor when he's talking about him, the Ohio governor said that he researched a lot of history like you were talking about, but he also was writing a book about the First Lady. Mm-hmm. And he said that it was going to be used as like learning material for him to write that autobiography. Mm-hmm. Larry says, I'm sure he got his money's worth out of it. I still haven't seen that autobiography printed yet. I'd like to see it one day to see what he learned. So like he even knew that this dude was so much of a degenerate. And I'm sure at this point in time, like now, I don't think it would cause such a stir. Obviously, we just went through a president who had a wife that had many nudes out.
Why aren't you sending an aide
or
someone to buy this?
You're
Stay
just telling on
car,
yourself. Man. That's all you're doing is telling on yourself when you're the one that shows up to do it. Like, you're the fucking governor. You don't think the guy that's selling it to you behind the newsstand is not like, hey, Gov, what's up? Yeah.
Say cheese. Click. Can you hold up the magazine
Quick picture,
next to your face? Yeah.
And maybe a second form of ID besides your face. That's bad. But that was how much people wanted this. That was Jackie O nudes at the time, I think, were just probably, she was the first lady that you'd want to see naked, first off. But at the same time, it was so taboo that him getting a hold of those.
Oh my God, it was so forbidden. This is the most, fashionable and like classy first lady there's ever been. This is Jackie O.
One of the most famous ladies in the world.
Goddamn Ray-Ban style named after this woman.
Really?
Oh yeah, the big. Her glasses, the big ones. Ray-Ban makes them, and they call them the Jackie O's.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, like she was a pioneer in and of her own right. This lady was covered in blood and brains from her husband getting blown up in the back of a Cadillac or whatever it was. But yeah, she's lived a life at this point.
Well, and at this point is when he starts to run into his more serious legal trouble. So Simon Leiss, Leis, I don't know, am I pronouncing that right? Leiss.
He's a bad man. So
yeah,
Leiss
so he's like
right.
the head of the Ohio People Against Obscenity or something like that, isn't it? He's basically a group of concerned parents who don't want their children looking at smut and corrupted.
You read about their meetings.
Yes, it was.
They would show up to these meetings and they would put nude pictures up on their projector and they would talk about them and dissect them. That sounds like a group of public perverts. Because I don't know how many...
Wait. Can we go back and dissect that last picture a little bit more?
Yeah, Larry put out a spread eagle shot on page 68 of the July issue. If we could go to that.
Is that on tonight's? Is that on tonight's docket? Yes. Okay. Can we just move that one up?
What would the cleaning crew have to deal with after one of those meetings? It'd be disgusting. And Larry knew that, I think. Because as these cases were coming out, he started to fight really back against the established.
The whole thing was pretty okay. I understand it from both perspectives. Here's my whole thing with all of Larry, like especially his early like lawsuits that came against him. The fact that these magazines were pretty difficult to get a hold of initially when they were new, to like buy them out of a store and you had to be a certain age and everything like that. The level of concern that people had for their children seeing this stuff is like, how do you think your kid is going to get a hold of this? Like, if you're doing your job as a parent, maybe you can prevent your child. It's not like today where it can come up on your fucking phone and you have access to literally every depraved thing you ever want to fucking look at. The fact that you had to seek this out does make me think that these people meeting up at these places just looking at horny pictures there was something to it.
And at that time, too, thinking about it, how would it get into your house? How would it get into your kid's hands? Either you had it or a friend.
His defense during the trial was simply that. It was like, if you don't like it, I'm not forcing you anywhere to look at it. You have to actively seek it out to be able to see it. So why is it offensive to you when you're having to go try to find what it looks like? Well, they sell it at the grocery store. Well, yeah, but they're not. Watch your kids while they walk by the magazine rack and don't buy it. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that.
One of his other defenses that he used, and this is in 76, so this is literally like a year after he first blows up with the Jackie O pictures. This is happening in Ohio where he's being prosecuted. And
it's almost like the people of Ohio versus Larry Flynt.
Pretty much.
But it's spearheaded essentially by this parents to
parent
fight
think tank group.
Yeah, whatever, this obscenity group.
I really liked the way that he attacked it because he put out mailers of pictures from I think it was the Vietnam War at this point. He sent all these pictures out to these people, and underneath in the caption it said, "Do you think that this is lewd material?"
Yeah, what's more obscene? And he would show one of his nude shots, then he would show actual pictures that had been on nationally syndicated like magazines, like in Time and on like New York Post, of literally like dead soldiers.
TV news.
And he's like, how is this obscene, but this is not obscene? What's more disturbing to you? And he started to kind of build a following of being like, yeah, I guess if you're going to say what's obscene and what's offensive, it's probably the dead people more so.
And it's a very logical thought and opinion that he has.
But because it's a local trial, he ends up just getting railroaded.
Pretty much.
There's, and I'm not sure if this was just in the People versus Larry Flynt, but his lawyer wants to submit evidence. This might have been just bumped up, but it makes sense kind of in this light. He brings in and wants to submit into evidence all the other adult magazines that are currently for sale. That includes Playboy, Penthouse, some other stuff that shows very similar obscene scenes. And his question is, why is this, why is it against Hustler and Larry Flynt, but not against these? And so his point was to prove that it was like prosecutorial misconduct or prosecution, something about
you're going after the local boy instead of going after everybody.
So despite the fact that this trial is kind of a sham, or I guess not despite it, because the trial is a sham, Flynt's found guilty and sentenced to like between 7 and 25 years in prison.
Mm-hmm. He ended up serving 6 days of that.
Verdict got overturned on misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct. I don't know why that's so hard to say.
Before that happens, I love this part of his story because it's almost like he has a redemption that doesn't quite get there. Mm-hmm. But after he's released, he's put on
the 6 days changed him.
Well, no,
I
not
saw
that
some shit, baby.
But after he's bailed out, pending the appeal after the 6 days, Ruth Carter, she had a Ruth Carter something, her new husband.
It was Jimmy Carter's wife, right? Or
Jimmy
cousin?
Carter's sister.
That's right.
Ends up reaching out to Larry because she watched the trial and she felt like they were almost kindred spirits as far as like she's admitted that she's had lustful feelings and she understood like that Larry was.
She's like, an evangelist, right? Is she a televangelist at that point, or is she
I don't know if
nationally?
they had that at that point. I think it was just evangelical at that
Okay.
point. But as an
Evangelical.
which we're talking top shelf of the religious nuts, and if you're
It's
evangelist,
Jimmy
sorry.
Carter's sister.
Yeah,
It's United States rule, basically like those the lodges and the oh, what is it in Wedding Crashers?
oh yeah, the
It's
family.
Sack Lodge, and then what's Christopher Walken's family's name?
I can't remember.
Oh my God, how are we forgetting this?
Look it up.
Okay, keep going.
So Ruth ends up wanting to meet with Larry, and as an evangelist, and as Larry being, at this point, I am okay with saying it because I don't think smut really has a negative connotation in my brain, but he's a smut peddler.
The Clearys.
The Clear, that's
Clearys
right.
and Lodges, two of the great American families.
At this point, I think that it was like Ruth had understood from the way that he had portrayed himself during the trial that he was just somebody who had deep, strong beliefs and really wanted to expand minds. And Ruth, for being an evangelist, I think kind of had that same understanding. And when they would meet, Larry and Althea flew out to meet Ruth and her husband. And Althea at this point, I think, was questioning the whole thing because she was abused by religious people being
I'm
younger.
not gonna lie to you. This seems like something just from when I saw it and everything. What it seems like from a different perspective is that if she's able to save Larry Flynt, that's going to go ahead and bump up her status in the evangelical community.
What's good for the goose may be good for the gander at
Yeah,
this point.
and but I think it's on her. It's worth the risk. Like, what if she doesn't? She's like, oh, I tried to talk to Larry Flynt and save him, but I couldn't do it. It's not even. It's low risk, high reward for her to try to do this. So I don't think she's doing this out of the goodness of her heart. I think Althea probably is on the right track.
I would say 50-50 because I do think that Ruth was kind of more of an open-minded gal because I don't know. This popped up in one or two different parts.
So do you think Ruth's a pervert?
I think she's a little bit of a
All right,
pervert.
nice.
Because this could be completely
I'm not
wrong.
saying that's bad. I'm
but
just saying don't pose as it. Just be like, yeah, I'm kind of a pervert.
she may have said at some point that like she found Jesus like as more of like a sexual attraction a little bit.
I've seen some. Have you seen Hunky G? Didn't we talk about Hot Jesus?
Whoever painted Jesus really
Mm-hmm.
liked him. And it could have been a woman, I think, because he's got some
You
very...
see Jesus' core?
White Jesus has a very solid...
Jesus is ripped.
Yeah. And on the cross, it's just a better picture. Like, it's a real
It's
nice
like when you're
shot.
full extended out doing chest flies.
Yeah.
He's about ready to honestly break that crucifix
probably
across
could.
his back.
I bet he probably did, but he
He's
already...
like, if my dad didn't tell me I had to be down here and die for all you motherfuckers, I'd chest fly this shit and beat all these Romans to death with the boards.
I'll be back. That was the first ever I'll be back
Yeah.
that ever happened.
Your tiny spears do not hurt me. Hammer these nails in deeper.
Ruth ends up flying back on the plane with...
Which was their plane. He
It
had his
was.
private jet.
It was Elvis's pink plane.
I thought it was black.
No, Larry Flynt owned Elvis's pink plane. That's what he flew around in.
Really?
Which is pretty sweet. Like
That is fucking cool.
it's
I thought it was
sick
a black
brand.
jet for some reason.
I'm pretty sure that it was. He owned
gonna
it
go
at
with
some
that then.
point. I'm not sure if it was this one,
Let's go with the Elvis plane.
but he kind of has this breakdown as him and Ruth are flying back. Now Thea's already been back. I think Ruth's husband's name was Bob. He was back wherever they were from. But he has his breakdown on this plane, and I think kind of has like his awakening, like coming to Jesus moment. And Ruth says that after they landed in Los Angeles, she stayed with him at the hotel because they're still living in Ohio. I don't know why they flew out to L.A., but she stays with him at the hotel overnight. And in his autobiography, he said that it was strictly platonic. They didn't have sex, which good for Larry. He kept his hands off of Jimmy Carter's sister. But that was kind of like his introduction, I would say, into religion and evangelicalism. I don't know if that's a
Process
word,
of
but
his
it
conversion.
it sounds right. Yeah.
Okay.
He reached out to a fairly proper evangelist that was running for office and offered her like a very large donation if she absolved him of all of his sins.
Oh,
So another
okay.
very low
That
risk.
shit, and that shit ain't free.
No, it's never free. She was fairly aware of Larry's publicity stunts, though, and sniffed it out pretty quick and was just like, no.
Because if this gets traced back to me that part of my donation comes from you, then it's going to completely torpedo my career.
It's going to look bad. And,
As in, yeah.
And what are you going to do with it
As
after
an evangelist, yeah, that's going to look bad. You're getting money from Larry Flynt.
Well,
the open vulva guy?
If you absolve him and then he keeps putting out these magazines, it's going to make you look terrible. And Althea at this point was like, cool.
We're on a schedule. I absolve him every year. And then he sends up his tab again with all these dirty magazines, sends us a sizable donation, and then I absolve him again.
October to October, we're just he's sinning, we're absolving. That's just how it works. Althea's like, cool. If you want to clean your shit up, that's great. This is a moneymaker, so I'm gonna stick with Hustler. I'm gonna make this shit keep going on. And this leads all the way into him.
This is when he gets sued by the publisher of Penthouse because he says something about the guys. Let's see.
That's a tad later. So
you didn't. I'm going off your board, man.
Yeah, he's just. There's so much shit that he did, and there's so many court cases that he was in that it's just like every fucking thing that happens is just like, where does this come from? Because he's being sued in multiple cities at multiple times all the time.
Anywhere, here's the deal: is he's able to be sued anywhere where Hustler is being distributed and sold
For obscenity, for lewdness,
So
for
it's
all
not
this
just a
different shit.
national. Yeah, it's not just the place where they're making them; it's the places where they're sold. So I mean, anywhere that you're distributing this, you can have a lawsuit brought against you. He ends up saying something to her. Last name is Keaton. I can't remember what her first name is. She's the girlfriend of the publisher of Penthouse.
Yeah.
It was like over a cartoon or something like that. But it ends up being to where I think she ends up winning, doesn't she?
So, yeah.
Because then it goes, he appeals it. It goes to, I think, the Supreme Court. And then that's where Flint
Puts
repeatedly
on one
shouts,
of his best shows.
Yeah, this is when he repeatedly shouts, "Fuck this court," and then he refers to them as a assholes and a token cunt.
Yeah.
And
So before we get to that, because I want to spend a little bit of time on that, because that's possibly one of the funniest things that I've ever heard come out of a court case. So obviously when he's no more obviously's. When he's let out and he does everything with Ruth, he becomes a born again evangelical, all that kind of stuff. Then he ends up winning the appeal. So all the charges for the 7 to 25 years that he got for the first obscenity charges and all that were dropped. So
that easy.
When you look at it, they brought up enough evidence of you're targeting one person here in this.
Oh, okay.
The prosecutors came after you
That's
instead of
right,
coming
because
after
it was
everybody.
no longer, the appeal was at the higher court, so it wasn't just a local bias. It was an actual fair trial. Gotcha.
And they did accuse the judge of being biased and all that kind of stuff. So he gets off on that.
Did you know in the movie People versus Larry Flynt, the judge is played by Larry Flynt?
Is it?
Yeah, the judge from Ohio that ends up sentencing him to the 7 to 25 years and does that, that's Larry Flynt.
I like that even more. He wanted to take an active role in it. So then in 1976, we're on to what you talked about. So the publisher of Penthouse, his girlfriend got angry over a cartoon of her getting VD, or not VD, but her getting an STD from Bob, the guy that was the publisher of Penthouse. And
It's like Bob Cerrone or
something like that.
Yeah.
But when you think about some of these magazines and kind of what you were talking about as far as like the creme de la creme of Playboy, it was pictures, but it was also articles and shit like that. Penthouse was a little more picture heavy. Hustler...
But Penthouse had the Penthouse letters. That's where the whole thing about Dear Penthouse comes from.
The sexual...
Yep, so Penthouse would have, instead of articles and like everything like Playboy would have, Penthouse had basically dirty letters writing about like all these encounters and stuff. And then Hustler was just like...
raw pictures, and it was cartoons and just goofy shit. And I like that. Again, I'll say I like that. I like that because it's just like the most dumbing down of anything, like political cartoons, satirical cartoons. And this was a cartoon that was made...
leaving no safe space. Like, I'm not just going to do the porn thing. I'm going to do this and this and yeah.
I'm going to give you a laugh with your jerk off.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a full service setup. I'm not going to make your mind really engage beyond the pictures and then the cartoons. So her first case gets dropped because of the statute of limitations.
That's what it was.
And she ends up finding, I want to say it was where they were, maybe in Virginia,
New
Rhode
Hampshire,
Island,
something like that.
Yeah,
She was able to do it in a smaller state.
Little place. Is where her second lawsuit comes out of. And her second lawsuit made it all the way to the Supreme Court, which is...
I forgot he was... I knew you have it there. I forgot that, before I mentioned that, I forgot he was shot before that.
Yeah, and that's where I got a tad confused on how everything works. But during this time between 76 and the first one gets dropped, and then the SCOTUS appeals that she had won, and he had appealed it all the way up to the Supreme Court. In 1978, they're down in Georgia fighting yet another obscenity trial because he's getting sued, like we talked about, in every state that had somebody that had beef with him. As they're walking up the court steps to walk into the house or the courthouse in Gwinnett County, he gets shot by a guy named Joseph Paul Franklin. And I believe he ended up killing his lawyer, and he shot...
He's classified as a serial killer.
Yeah, well, this was before all this. And there's questions, there's good conspiracy theories that John Paul wasn't the one that shot him and that he just owned up to it because he was a serial killer at that point. And they think that there may have been a couple others.
It was something about, there was the conspiracy that some people with that obscenity community against like parents or people against obscenity had actually like tried to hire someone to kill him.
And that does play into Joseph Paul Franklin because anybody
that far. It's really not that far fetched.
No,
I mean,
because
is there proof of it? Probably not, but it's not a far fetched.
Not too far because Joseph was a white supremacist.
Here's the other thing too: is I think something that kind of strikes me about this too is I think that Larry was a lot more like around people. He wasn't as secluded. He was like kind of a man of the people because he would go out because he was. Hugh Hefner didn't have to fight for the free speech type lawsuits and everything. Mm-hmm. He operated strictly within the confines of not pushing anything because he had his niche that he had created and it worked for him. And I think Penthouse was able to go ahead and just hover below that obscenity line because Hustler was there to be the most obscene. So they were always going to take the most flack. But then what happened when Hustler was gone, I think then they would have gone after Penthouse.
I also think that that's the difference between Larry Flynt dying being worth $500 million and Hugh Hefner dying and being worth $50 million.
Yeah.
Because he was more willing to push the envelope, which made him more money. And then later on, him going into Playboy had their pay channel, but Hustler was and still is printing pornos left and right.
They still realize that a lot of people either don't have access. People have access to the internet, but some people still like to just beat off analog style.
Well, and even then, the magazine's not nearly as prominent as it was, but they've gone into producing pornos that make it onto the internet. They have pay sites. Their shit gets on RedTube and Xhamster.
They still just happen to print stuff. I mean, Playboy still does print and everything.
Do they?
Yeah, pretty sure they do.
Huh. I walked into a couple gas stations over this week while I was researching this stuff and just looked and asked, and it's not as accessible. Like I'm sure smoke shops you can still get them in.
It's behind the counter now, and it's still in the plastic bags. And
I can confirm that Three Mavericks do not have Playboys.
You gotta want porn to go into a gas station and ask for the stuff below the counter.
There is a certain. I don't know if you ever remember this, but I remember occasionally when we'd go on flights as kids in the Hudson News and that kind of stuff, there would be the black covers on the Playboys.
Yeah, I don't even know if that was those style, because for a while there, they even had to put like fucking like Maxim and FHM, I think was the
I think they still do. They put them in the black covers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they still have to do that, so...
Where would be the most awkward place that you think you could buy porn? I would say before you're about to get on a flight sitting next to three other people.
Didn't we discuss this during one of the ones before when I went on that golf trip? The guy was reading the porn. So I'm telling you right now, you, buddy.
But when it's a magazine that you have to sit and flip through.
Yeah, but that's why you're not buying them, to take them. You don't see them on planes. Had you not had access to your phone and have that stuff on your phone, you might see some people trying to risk it, doing the old magazine inside the magazine.
Why
you
would
buy
they
yourself
sell
a
it
Good
in an
Housekeeping, and you buy yourself a Hustler. You slip the Hustler into the Good Housekeeping, and then you just make sure that stays up nice and close to your face.
Yeah, I just to me, it seems like if you're selling that in an airport, it's going to make your ride awkward because maybe it's like you're traveling, so you need a little material in the hotel. But there's that feeling of wanting to look at it before you get to the hotel.
Okay, before we get in, because I want to talk about all the stuff surrounding his being shot and the dude that did it.
Yeah.
But I gotta make a pee-pee.
Okay.
All right, while we take a break from class and take care of some business, you can also take care of some business.
If you don't follow us on Instagram or Twitter already, our Instagram handle is Historically High Pod. That's Historically High POD. And our Twitter is Historically High. That's Historically HI.
All right, and back to our show. A group of people. He was the spokesman for those. So he made himself accessible. And I think when it came to like Hefner, you look back at like biographies of Hefner, he always seemed like he was traveling kind of in a contained group. Like he was always where he wanted to be, where he could control everything. So he wasn't really like super publicly accessible. Like you couldn't meet him on the street. Larry Flynt seems like the kind of guy that would be around the community.
Well, and he had the penthouse. So why would you ever leave a big penthouse full of hot women and grottos and hot tubs?
Who are you talking about?
Hefner.
Oh, this was before he had the mansion in California. This was like when he was in New York.
I think Hef was always on the West Coast.
Yeah, he didn't have a pet. He lived at the mansion. The whole point is the Playboy Mansion, isn't it?
Yeah, did I say penthouse?
You did.
It's
We're mixing up our magazines now.
yeah. I'm getting that. But Hugh didn't really have much of a reason to leave. He had like his own little secluded area, and maybe he was more of an introvert.
That's the thing is Larry was
an extrovert.
Champion of the First Amendment or whatever.
He was a man of the people.
Yep. Fighting for the people. So paralyzed from the waist down. So then he goes to the Supreme Court. That's when he says they're nothing but 8 assholes and a token cunt, referring to Sandra Day O'Connor.
Which he might have had an argument there. She was a little bit of.
Well, she was the only woman on the Supreme Court.
Wasn't RBG in there?
Oh, so she's one of the. Oh, yeah, she was.
I think she was before Sandra Day. I might be wrong on that, but
I feel like.
I would have felt worse if he'd have called RBG.
If that's in 83, that seems like that should be RGB territory.
Should be around there.
Hold on.
Maybe he had a little bit more respect for her than he did for Sandra Day.
Oh, no. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was from 93 to 2020. So Sandra Day. Yeah,
she must have gone in old.
Well, it's when younger judges now get brought in, but it used to be, I think you had to be a really seasoned judge to be able. That should.
We used to have higher standards.
That should fucking probably say something, right? That you used to have this entire wealth of experience and be at this age because you'd practiced law for so long.
You're a federal judge for 30 years.
Judge. Now you get fucking 40-year-old or judges in their fucking 40s that are like, I tried cases in this place and all my stuff was determined by the Bible.
All you had to do was worry about appeals. Like you never had to see a case. Yeah, that's. I think there's a lot of stuff in today's culture where I feel like it could be helped by younger people having an infusion. Something like that, I would rather have a seasoned judge who's tried a billion cases be somebody who's in charge of that.
And then in the same year, I think kind of in response to the whole Supreme Court thing, because didn't he end up losing? Oh no, when he was yelling "fuck this court," didn't he get taken away for like, what would you consider that in court? God damn it! It's something that you see in TV all the time. I'll have you arrested for.
He was charged with
contempt of court.
Contempt of court.
There you go.
So, just to kind of flashback a little bit for when he gets shot, and he gets shot in between this because he lost the first case, and then he kept appealing. He appealed it 3 times. So he initially lost it and argued it, or he lost it in '83, and he ended up not getting a ruling. They heard the case in '87, so that leads to where he gets shot. When he got shot, it was really bad because, like we said, it entered through the stomach and it came through his body and it clipped his spine.
I think when I mentioned the fact he was paralyzed from the waist down, I think that sums up bad.
He was and he wasn't, and I understand that sounds stupid when you're talking about being paralyzed.
Are you getting into something that his dick still worked?
No. Okay. I wish that was his case. I don't know. I never looked that up.
You'd think that would be something that if anyone that gets paralyzed from the waist down is going to mention if their dick still works or not,
it'd be Larry.
Would be like, my dick still works.
Yeah, and maybe that could have been his ultimate punishment, was like his dick stopped working at that point. But his issue, and
is that some type of
karmic?
Either that or is that some type of fucking voodoo spell?
Could be.
One of the evangelical or people have a fucking Larry Flynt voodoo doll and just have that needle right in the spine.
He he was still at this point really into being an evangelical though. Like he still had a belief in God. And when I say he was and he wasn't paralyzed, he didn't have any feelings besides pain from his waist down. So he was still feeling a burning feeling in his legs and had that pain constantly. And that's what led him back into getting addicted to opiates and painkillers.
That's right. Okay.
So
I keep trying to move on from this thing, and
yeah.
I completely forget about even the Joseph Paul Franklin thing. And the reason that he even shot Larry Flint is because Hustler was the first magazine that had done the interracial pictorial or spread
And
and
he didn't
everything,
like that.
and he didn't like that. And so it's crazy to say, but it's a race-driven.
A race-driven crime.
Yeah.
So that's where it kind of leads me to think that maybe all the people that wanted him shot maybe didn't go that far. Or maybe they found him and didn't realize that that was his thought process.
Because didn't Joseph Paul Franklin, he didn't get found guilty, right?
So
Or it was like a super reduced sentence or some shit.
this is weird, and I think this might play into Larry's sick mind. That you and I had a discussion about this a couple weeks ago off air, but when he found out, because Joseph Paul Franklin had already been arrested for this string of murders and was already sentenced to death, once he admitted to the crime of shooting Larry Flint, which also brings up the conspiracy theories, because he admitted to a lot of shit after he had already been given the death penalty.
Hold on a second. He wasn't just arrested at the time when he shot them?
No, he got away. He got away with this whole thing, and there was a manhunt looking for him, but how hard were the police actually going to look for him?
Wait. So the only reason he's connected to this was that he was arrested after performing the murders? And then he came back and was like, oh, by the way, remember when Larry Flint got shot? That's your boy.
he
I
admitted,
didn't fucking know that. That's
yeah.
fucking nuts.
So he had already been arrested and convicted for the string of serial killings that he did. And before he was sentenced to death, he started admitting to all these other crimes. And some of them they had looked into, some they didn't. They just kind of took this one at face value. When Larry finds out that he admits to it, though, Larry starts paying and openly petitioning him to not get the death penalty.
That's right, because he wants him to fucking rot.
And that's what we were talking about
That's
off air
right.
earlier. I personally do believe that the death penalty is the easy way out.
Yes,
I think
agree.
living everyday life in prison is worse.
Yes.
We've already proven that it's more cost effective to do it because of all the appeals that you're allowed to do when you get a death penalty case. So Larry wanted this guy not to die because he wanted him to suffer the exact same amount that Larry suffers in the wheelchair. And Larry suffered a lot. I think I don't know what his
That
ultimate,
gold-plated wheelchair.
which is sick. That's
Did you
another
also
thing.
hear that there was this conspiracy that because he was paralyzed, he showed up, he was at the Supreme Court hearings in his wheelchair. They thought that he was going to try to like pack it with C4 or some shit and like blow it up along with all the justices.
Yeah, it happened later on that that's a conspiracy that he
Yeah.
wanted to take them down as far as take himself down.
Well, here's one too, kind of moving on from that. He was also, in response, I think, to that Supreme Court case, he ends up releasing these. They're the DeLorean tapes.
Yeah. Okay. Before that, I want to go back to him being in the Supreme Court because he did some fucking funny shit. Like you were talking about when he yelled "fuck this court" and then he said "you're nothing but 8 assholes and a token cunt." He immediately, like we talked about, gets held for contempt of court. They take him for contempt of court, and where he is, they don't have handicap accessible bathrooms. And Larry's like, "Gotta take a shit. What are we gonna do?" And they're like, we'll take you to the hospital. They have handicap facilities that'll work." He goes, "Perfect. Let's get going because I got a shit." They're like, "We don't have a vehicle that's going to take you there." And he's like, I have a limo that's handicap accessible. Can we do that? And they're like, yeah, but when we put you in the limo, we're going to follow you over to the hospital. We're going to make sure that everything gets done right. He's like, "Fine, perfect, that works." They take him over to the hospital. He takes his shit. They're coming back and they're going to court. And as they're going to court, Larry had a shirt printed up that said "fuck this court." He changes into the shirt. They wheel him back into the Supreme Court while he's wearing a shirt that says "fuck this court." And immediately they see it when I don't know if he took off his blazer or whatever. They see it. They're like, yeah, contempt of court. Get your ass back out
Like
there.
a fucking tearaway.
Like,
Think of tearaways at a basketball game. You just fucking...
they brought him back into the court. This guy had the forethought to print up a shirt that said, fuck this court. He's the ultimate provocateur. And going into these DeLorean tapes, it is never really more on full display than coming into this. Like, he had a situation back when he was buying up bars that he ended up paying off one of his loans where he had the strippers in his bar show up to the bank, and he brought a wheelbarrow, and he bought however much his loan amount was in pennies, and had the strippers come up and open up the bags of pennies and dump them into the wheelbarrows. And then he brought the wheelbarrow into the bank where they had the note on his bar, and he paid his loan balance off in fucking pennies. Like, that's how petty he was. He walked through the town to do it. So, like, everybody saw this show that he was putting on. And it leads into the DeLorean case, so you can talk about that.
Well, so what was it? I'm not familiar with the actual, like, I read what was on the DeLorean tapes, but what was the whole point, like, quickly, behind the whole DeLorean case that the FBI was investigating? Is it related to the car?
Yeah, so John DeLorean was the developer of the DeLorean car company, which made the DeLorean that was in Back to the Future. They made these cars out of, like, iron, like steel, to where, like, you'd have to clean them with a Brillo pad.
The outside was made... I thought the outside was stainless steel.
It was stainless steel, yeah.
Okay.
So they made it out of stainless
Why
steel.
didn't you just say stainess steel?
Because I didn't know the word at that point.
Iron?
Yeah,
They forged these cars in the depth of Mordor.
I should have been better about that. I get it.
Hey, I like that.
So they weren't making these cars out of, like, cheap materials or anything like that. DeLorean was hemorrhaging money pretty bad. In order to keep his car company afloat, he was a cocaine distributor.
Yes.
And
of course you are.
Yeah.
You don't design that car if you're not a cocaine distributor.
that is true. Thinking about the car, you'd have to be on
If
something.
you lined up a lineup of cars and it's like, which one of these cars does cocaine? You'd be like, that one.
Camaro looks like Firebird. Not a lot of ideas there.
Firebird, yeah. The van, the VW van looks like weed. The stainless steel one looks like it probably does coke.
Yeah, like, I would be shocked if it
Do you
didn't
think
have,
that's when
like,
he went into the designers? He's like, what do you want? He's like, what do you want, Mr. DeLorean? He's like, I want you to design me a car that looks like it's on cocaine. They're like, okay, we got it. Here's a bag for inspiration.
I want you to put divots in the steering wheel so I can put key bumps in the steering wheel and just lean over and take them. So he ends up getting popped because he gets caught up in a sting with the FBI. And they basically tell him in these tapes, like, you can either cop to what you did or we can go ahead and go after your family and, like, kill your daughter.
They said they're going to beat his daughter.
Yeah, that's what it was.
On tape. He's like, you can either cop to it, you can confess, or you can watch as we beat your daughter, or your daughter can get beaten or some shit like that.
And during this time, he had sued the government for...
What's crazy is how did he fucking get these tapes?
That plays into his whole deal of what's going on next. But... Ooh, that one got me.
Ooh.
But
did you feel that tingle your brain? Pickle your brain a little bit?
When you inhale and you're just immediately like, uh-oh, this is a cough.
Get it out, get it out, get it out.
So, Jesus, while he was fighting that, he had sued the government for press access into, I believe it was the Grenada conflict. It was something along those lines, but he was basically suing so the press could get access to that war and all that. And during that time, he opened up a presidential bid as a Republican to try to, I don't know if it was further like his star power or this was just like his off the wall crazy, like, I'm going to be a weird political figure. But he's doing all this.
Reality parodies history eventually at some point.
It's true. Eventually we fall for the trick. But he's brought into court because they need to figure out during this trial what his source was for the DeLorean tapes that he had put out. And
because it's like a national security breach, right? It's something to do with that.
Yeah, well, it's the FBI being caught with their hand or with their pants down, and they don't want that being out.
Yeah.
So he's brought up on the stand. He says, "Fuck you. I'm not going to tell you
My
anything.
source. Yeah.
And
I don't reveal my sources.
he ends up getting put in jail for 6 months because when they brought him back in, they told him that he was going to be ordered to pay $20,000 a day for every day that he doesn't reveal his source. On the first day, he rolls back into court with a bunch of strippers with trash bags filled with $1 bills. He rolls himself in a metal army helmet, and he's wearing the American flag as a diaper. The women...
Wasn't this 6 months because it was desecration of the American flag?
Yep.
That's what it was,
He was put in jail for 6 months for desecration of American flag because he wore it as a diaper. And nowadays, everybody wears the American flag for literally everything. You wear them as swim trunks. You see bikinis that are the American flag. Apparently, that's not desecration anymore. Like, we've just completely gone away from the flag code.
We are in the fucking twilight zone.
We're in weird times, yeah.
Where the flag is to be respected and held sacred, yet the people that are shouting that are wearing it technically desecrated by turning it into a headband and putting it on shorts and a shirt and all this kind of stuff, or making it smaller than other flags, or displaying other flags, above that flag and everything, but still preaching about how sacred it is and everything.
We can't let the flag touch the ground, but we can put it on hats that will eventually always touch the ground.
Or you can put it on shorts and you're literally sitting on the like.
Very odd times.
We're in the age of hypocrisy without even recognizing that it's completely hypocritical. But back to Larry. So yeah, 6 months for desecration. Still ordered to pay. Is he still ordered to pay at that point, even while he's jailed? The 20,000, or is it like you're going to pay this or you're going to go to jail?
I think that was more of once he's in jail, like he can't give up the source. This is kind of a weird, like Balco, Barry Bonds, the guy that injected him, like he refused to say anything, so they put him in jail for a bunch of years. I don't know if he was still racking up that $20,000 a day for not saying anything, but he kept getting brought into court and he wouldn't do it. So I don't know where that falls, and I kind of couldn't figure out like if it was just dropped at some point, maybe after the case was settled.
Yeah. Well, can we please get to the Falwell?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank God I wanted this. So in '84,
this might be one of the. We've talked about a lot of funny stuff on this podcast. This shit that Chris and I are about to read might be the funniest thing that I've ever seen.
This guy's come up before too.
Yes,
just
he
in
has.
passing. So in '84, and I don't know if this is when he wins or when the court case is happening. So Jerry Falwell sues Hustler for printing a fake liquor. It's called Campari liquor. And
Have you ever had Campari?
Huh?
Have you ever had Campari?
Oh, is it a real liquor?
Yeah.
Oh, but it's a fake ad for the liquor.
Yep.
I thought you put fake ad or fake liquor or something like that. Fake liquor ad. That's why I thought it was fake.
Yeah, okay. Campari used to have these ads that they would put up in magazines about like interviews that they would do
while sharing a Campari or something like that. Like conversations over Campari. And so they did one for Jerry Falwell. No, Jerry Falwell is like a very well-known hardcore. Is he?
He's an evangelist. He started Liberty University.
Okay. So
which Jerry Falwell Jr. was the guy that got caught up when his wife was fucking that.
He was getting cucked by the pool boy.
Yep.
And they would try. There's that new Netflix documentary or something about that guy.
I haven't seen it yet, but it's that story. That's Jerry Falwell Jr. that happened to. So this whole family has been just mired in this shit.
So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's very well done.
So no. You and I have to read it.
Okay, who do I get to be?
You pick. I sent it to you, right?
I want to be Falwell.
Okay. So this was a spoof ad that they had put in Hustler, and I don't know. Getting back to the shooting part, when he got shot, he really stopped believing in God. Obviously, because he was confined to a wheelchair, he felt pain every day. He was addicted to opioids at that point. Like all these things lead to him being like, "Fuck God, this is a bad situation."
He was like, "I was right the first time. I was doing it right the first time."
Can I go back? Can I get unbaptized?
So the whole thing with these Campari ads too is it's Campari. You'll never forget your first time. So they talk about their first time.
It's a great thing to make fun of.
Was Jerry Falwell Southern?
Lynchburg, Virginia. Yeah.
Okay. My first time was in an outhouse outside Lynchburg, Virginia.
Wasn't it a little cramped?
Not after I kicked the goat out.
I see. You must tell me all about it.
I never really expected to make it with Mom. But then after she showed all the other guys in town such a good time, I figured, what the hell?
Well, your mom. Isn't that a bit odd?
I don't think so. Looks don't mean that much to me in a woman.
Go on.
Well, we were drunk off our God-fearing asses on Campari, ginger ale and soda. That's called a fire and brimstone at the time. And Mom looked better than a Baptist hole with a $100 donation.
Campari and the crapper with Mom. How interesting. Well, how was it?
The Campari was great, but Mom passed out before I could come.
Did you ever try it again?
Sure, lots of times, but not in the outhouse. Between Mom and the shit, the flies were too much to bear. I didn't read this before.
We meant the Campari.
Oh, yeah. As I always get sloshed before I go out to the pulpit. You don't think I could lay down all that bullshit sober, do ya? And scene. No, so, yeah, so...
Well, right at the bottom, before we talk about that, right at the bottom, in the very smallest letters ever, it says, ad parody not to be taken seriously.
That's right.
And this wasn't, like, Larry didn't want that put on the ad. His lawyers had to be like, yo,
it saved him.
yeah, we did some bad shit here. Can we just cover our asses for once? And Larry's like, fine, whatever. If you guys think this will be better, okay.
It better be goddamn small print right at the bottom of that goddamn ad.
Yeah, the print is probably like half as big as the rest of it, and
They
there's
use bigger font above it to make it seem smaller, but
Yeah.
it's about the same size as the actual, maybe a little smaller than the actual dialogue in the ad. It's a pretty hefty ad. It's a full page. So Jerry Falwell sues him for slander, and original suit was for $45 million. Did Falwell end up winning?
So the first time he lost, and
Falwell did.
the first time, Falwell won the first time.
Okay.
So this suit that he sued him for was $45 million. That's a hell of a lot of money back in the 80s. And I might have talked about the first Supreme Court case and got the dates wrong on that. So maybe at this point, if it sounded right, go with it. If it didn't sound right, just forget it. But he ends up losing the first one. Huh?
It takes place. That's all that's important.
Yeah, it took place. So he ends up winning the first trial, and
Falwell does.
Yeah, Falwell does. It's like 3 different counts, and it was like defamation of character, emotional damages, and like a safety issue or something like that.
A big one, yeah.
And the judge immediately threw the first one out, and I think it might have been like the safety thing. He's just like, this doesn't reference it, not a big deal. So the whole entire time, his lawyer, or not Falwell's lawyers, Flint's lawyers are fighting, saying that this is free use. This is the First Amendment. We're allowed to be doing this stuff. We put this disclaimer at the bottom that it's just a parody ad. Parody law applies here 100%. Before parody law, basically, like this case set up a lot of different things that legal scholars still look back on when they teach these kind of
Some
lessons.
of the things that Larry Flynt went through are actually taught to like first-year law students.
Oh yeah,
as like protected speech trials and things like that. What do they call those?
It set a lot of precedences.
Yes. Yep.
And so they end up losing it. And
you gotta tell me who loses it, because you keep seeing they lose it. So like that's why I have to keep asking.
I'm just Team Larry, so I was Larry. So Flynn ends up losing, Falwell ends up winning, but the judge only gives him $150,000 out of the $45 million that they were going for. And Flint could have taken this on the chin. I mean, the guy had $120,000 probably at the ready most of the time. Like that's not a drop in the bucket. He died $500 million rich, $150,000, not that much. And instead of doing that and letting the evangelicals prevail, he goes ahead and increases it, keeps pushing it. He ends up appealing it multiple times. It finally lands in front of the Supreme Court, and he ends up getting the win. He ends up not having to pay the $150,000 because the Supreme Court, this time obviously didn't call him 8 assholes and a cunt, which might have swayed the court more in his favor.
The fact that they have to completely put that aside when they're doing their rulings too, and be like, we have to view this as a completely separate incident, a completely separate case. What's crazy though is that afterward, and I don't know how much of this I actually believe, but that I know he put it in his autobiography, but that Flint and Falwell became friends. I don't know if they became friends or anything. They went on tour together, apparently. I didn't see a lot of information about the tour, but something does make sense about something Flint does say. He said, I always suspected that the reason that we were able to be friendly with each other is because he knew that I was peddling my bullshit, and I knew that he was peddling his bullshit, and we were both aware that what we were both peddling was bullshit.
Yeah, and in that
It was like some
autobiography,
type of weird, like opposite end of the spectrum, mutual respect or some shit.
well, and maybe to boil it down and make it make more
The
sense
fact
to
he didn't
you.
say this till after Falwell was dead, though, that's what kind of leads a little bit of grain of
Yeah,
suspicion to it.
in his autobiography, he says, and this is the way that I take away from it, is both of these guys' main like drives to be businessmen and the businesses they were was money, obviously. And what's going to pack the house more than a guy who's so far on one end of the spectrum as Flint and so far on the other as Falwell. So they toured the country and did these debates about all these different topics as far as like cleanliness and purity and pornography and all that. They both saw that as basically a way to cash in on everything.
You could invite people from both sides. These debates weren't just drawing in a crowd of a specific belief. You were drawing it in, and so yeah, to me that seems like
They're making money.
especially if you're able to approach it as from a purely business relationship. Yeah, that's gonna make money. It's almost the first touring, like almost like a political or belief freak show.
That's really what it was. It was like a freak show. It was a sideshow. And I do think that it was more of a fun thing because in his biography, like I say, along with this stuff, right at the end when he's talking about Jerry, he says that he believes that this was Jerry exercising his faith of forgiveness and understanding to the highest extent that everybody ever has.
Trying to get those pulpit points, or piety points?
Yeah, but I do think like if this was more of like just a sham thing, he wouldn't have put that in there.
Do you feel like they sometimes think, like religious people think that God is like Dumbledore at Hogwarts and handing out like points to people if they do nice? They're like 10 points to you for opening the door for that woman.
I definitely think that that's a thing because of the way that they preach it. Like if you didn't preach that all these things were good, if you didn't have to have repetitive lessons about like repentance and turning the other cheek and things like that, it wouldn't be considered such a high value virtue to have.
Yeah.
But I think that they were buddies. I think that they ended up finding a healthy respect for each other.
It's like perfect strangers, man. Opposites attract. Can
Yeah.
you imagine that being like a perfect strangers show with Cousin Larry and Balky? Like the zany antics, like they're living together in an apartment and Jerry's like, God damn it, what are these panties doing in the laundry? And Larry's like, sorry, Jerry.
Larry schedules out the
Larry
front room.
and Jerry, come on.
Larry and Jerry does go well together. I think that they were buddies. And I think that this was kind of like his first really, probably first and foremost, his landmark case. I didn't know quite as much about this. And The People versus Larry Flynt, the movie, which was kind of my first introduction to him, didn't come out. It was 1996. So it was a long ass time ago. And I was fairly young. I think I saw it probably like fresh out of high school, where your mind's still kind of a piece of molten lava. And I didn't always have the best thought process about Larry because of it, because he kind of seemed like a degenerate. And I didn't, it took me a long time to be comfortable realizing like, well, he was a degenerate, but I'm also
We're
a
all
degenerate.
degenerates in our own way and everything. And at a certain point, you're just like, oh man, it's exhausting not just wanting to do what I want to do or liking what I want to like. And then you almost have like, it doesn't have to be an admiration, but you almost have like a mutual understanding with like everyone's just going to kind of let their own flag fly.
It's a wash. If you don't kill anybody and you don't hurt anybody else, like peddle your shit, like make that happen.
So kind of jumping forward with Larry just a little bit. So he stays active in all of this with like the running of a hustler and everything. He's the guy, just kind of some points. He's the guy that also, when the Pam and Tommy video came out, he was the one to eventually get a hold of it once it kind of spread across the country. If you haven't watched, there's a Hulu show called Pam and Tommy. He's kind of in one of the episodes. Not him, but that you see kind of the repercussions of the
Portrayal,
the lawsuit and what was going to happen. So what ends up happening is because he's able to acquire either the pictures or the video of Palm and Tammy,
Palm and Tammy,
or
Tom
Pamela
and
and
Tammy.
Tom. He's going to take stills out of it and put them in his magazine. Pamela Anderson tries to sue him. There's something that occurs that she's not able to sue him, and so he ends up being able to like print the pictures, but she gets some money out of it. You'll have to rewatch the show, but he's also involved in that. So if anyone's familiar with the Pam and Tommy sex tape, I think a lot of that got brought to total national attention by Larry Flynt. And here's the thing, though. This is where I start to kind of try to have to balance that kind of thing, because like also watching that show, you understand that at this time, like you can say what you want about like Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson or whatever, but at this point they were married. They made this as a private tape. It got stolen, and this is, I think, the biggest thing about Larry that my takeaway is Larry's gonna Larry. He's just gonna do what he wants to do.
Well, and it's technically it's kind of like a play from the back of the book because he did this shame shit with Jackie O.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, and I think that he was someone who he was aligned on a certain course of morality, but he also didn't take into account how he could be hurting other people. And so kind of jumping forward to 2009, Flint actually sues his nephews who are using the Flint name in porn production. He said their porn was shit.
He said that they made inferior porn that he wasn't okay with his name being
If
attached
Larry
to.
wanted to make porn, Larry was going to make his own porn, and it was going to be up to the Larry Flynt standards. And I mean, when did he end up passing?
2021. So he lived a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And getting to this point, I'm not going to say that he's absolved from Jackie O or Pam Anderson or anything like that because those are all standalone events.
Anyone that he hurt throughout the course of his rise or whatever.
I'm
sure they weren't they're the famous ones that were known. I'm sure at some point there were, and I'm not saying abuse or anything like that, but I'm sure there were girls that posed for him that were probably taken advantage of in a sense of like contracts, things like that treatment.
In a business standpoint.
From a business standpoint.
The things that he did as he got older, he's the epitome of fuck you money, where I like it and I respect it. And I don't know if this was penance for what he did to Pam and Tommy and what he did to Jackie O, but he started putting bounties on things. Like for running for president as Republican, he really wanted to attack the family values preachers that were in the government to almost be accountable for what they did. Like he let his freak flag fly, obviously, but he didn't like it when people were hypocrites, when they would come out against something while doing it. His
biggest thing was the hypocrites. He put a $1 million bounty to anyone with documented evidence of sex with a congressman, senator, or any office holder. So the government did not give him a good taste in his mouth. What he felt their infringement was upon free speech and obscenity laws and everything. So he was going to prove, and I think it's pretty much common belief at this point that, people in Congress and senators and representatives get down to some shady shit. And he was just like, you know what, I'm going to get some information on it. And that was a standing offer. He had a standing offer for $20 million nudes of
Hillary.
Didn't he? But he endorsed Hillary, didn't he? Yeah.
He $20 million is a shitload of money at any point in time. Mm-hmm. But for nudes of Hillary seems like the fucking weirdest thing in the world. And he never really explained it. Like, I don't know if it was to publish it, because he did something later on that kind of makes me think that it was a way of protection for Hillary. But either way...
Are you talking about when that army private that got captured?
Yeah. So Jessica Lynch, and this was 2003, so this was during the war in Iraq. He paid... I don't remember how much it was, but he paid a fairly decent amount of money, and she was a POW. She was captured.
Yeah, it was the rescue operation where she was being held at a hospital, and they were able to go ahead and raid the hospital during like a special operation and rescue her and get her out. But I don't know exactly what the nude pictures covered, if they were done before she'd sent them to a boyfriend before deployment or something like that. But he paid for those strictly so he could withhold them and never show them, and so they were never released because he had ownership of them.
Which, that's awesome. Like, that's a fucking great thing to do.
What I'm saying, though, do you feel like that's at a time when you're trying to scrub your moral slate? He's getting close. Like, at this point, he has medical issues and everything.
I think it may have been more of like a respect thing, though. Like I think that he.
No, it is. I'm saying you can kill two birds there.
You think that it was more of like a moral conundrum than a.
I don't think it had to be more. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think you can do one thing while also accomplishing the other thing.
Mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
One of his big wins that I loved hearing was during the Clinton impeachment. So like 98, 99. He offered up $1 million to anybody who would testify to any member of Congress having sex with them. And the incoming Speaker of the House, Robert Livingston, ended up having to resign because somebody took Larry up on it and had sex with this guy. It was a huge scandal. He had committed a lot of adultery with this lady and ended up having to resign because of Larry's standing offer. Like, I love that. I love that he's trying to root out all this hypocrisy and all these terrible things that go on in the government. And it's nice to see somebody who, obviously, when I say fuck you money, like $500 million, offering up $1 million isn't much when you got 500 million to chip off that block. So he wanted to basically bring the darkness into the light and let people see this shit, which is awesome. Like, that's a very noble cause to have, and it does wreak havoc among people that want that stuff hidden. But if you're a member of the public that doesn't have to deal with that shit and you only reap the benefits,
Well, and
that's great.
this isn't the first time he did that. So going back to kind of the Warren Commission, he was a really staunch critic of the Warren Commission. He had offered, even when he wasn't like super financially secure, offered $1 million for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the assassin John F. Kennedy. That's an insane, it's a business play though, if you really think about it, because if he's the one to gather that information, that's worth way more than $1 million to have that information that could possibly solve that case.
And to release it to the public because everybody wanted to know.
But he also, the simple fact that he knew nothing could come of it, which at point, if nothing came of it, he never was out that $1 million. But if he did get something, it was worth way more than that. He made sure, though, that offer was super visible. Like, Larry Flint's doing what? He always had this way of almost seeming benevolent or doing these good things, but there was always a business decision behind it. I think that's what it boils down to, is he was a good businessman. He was morally flexible, obviously, and he made some questionable decisions, regardless of kind of where you fall. But I think the whole kind of end result is that a lot of precedence was set by him
He was a,
for a lot of the expressionary freedoms we have.
as far as I'm concerned, he's more than a net positive on the world. He, regardless of how you feel about pornography, I think these kinds of things get a bad name because when you hear that somebody's addicted to porn, the porn isn't the addicting thing. It's the
So you're saying separate all that stuff and just look at it from a free speech advocacy point of view.
Yeah, because whether you believe that porn is good or bad, it's still something that's an expression and it's still something that is a business. But at the same time, it's just a means to an end. Like, if you're addicted to porn, you're not addicted to porn because the porn's so good. You're addicted to porn because that's your personality. And it's, in a way, sort of like drugs. Like, being addicted to drugs isn't the drug's fault. It's the physical addiction that your body has to it.
I still think it's one of those things where it was beneficial for him to do this, so it wasn't wholly benevolent that he was fighting for these rights. They aligned with what his goals were from a business perspective. It was a byproduct of what he had to do to make his business successful, and so that byproduct happens to be the thing that I think he's more celebrated for. Maybe not so much celebrated, but I guess respected or kind of like that.
I'd say celebrated. I think that when I say net positive, I see it as, and I understand that because it's a logical way to think about it. When him and Ruth were talking, he admitted that he was an anarchist, which to me, hearing that, he just loves to see the world burn. So I think that may have been more of his personality type.
I feel like that's kind of a blanket term that covers a broad spectrum. I don't know if he wanted to see the world burn. I just think
he wanted to see chaos.
I think he had a kink for controversy. I think his kink was controversy and being in the public eye and seeing what he could get away with. Seeing what he could, his preferences, how far he could push those.
I see that being the primary aggressor to a lot of what he did, and the money, I think, is secondary. It was like he knew that he could put on the performance that he liked to do, and then on the back end of it, he's like, oh yeah, and we made $5 million by doing this.
Well, difference of opinion, but it's good to have both points of view.
Yeah, and I think it could go either way. Like, I'm not saying that I feel like I'm right and you're wrong, anything like that, because they both. We don't know Larry.
That's what I'm saying.
I wish I would have met Larry. Like, I think he would have been a fun hang just to kind of pick his brain and see.
We just and now we're going to segue into the Larry Flynt interview.
Oh man, that would be. I'm bummed that he died. He died fairly young too. I think he was 78.
Well, that's not young, especially for someone who has spinal cord damage and probably other medical issues.
Yeah, he definitely had a lot going against him, but usually rich people tend to live very long lives. So I'm happy that we did this.
Larry Flynt.
Yeah,
a morally questionable pioneer.
Questionable pioneer is a good way to put it.
All right, man. You got any finishing thoughts?
No, I'm just happy we did it.
All right. Well, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Later.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.